All right, welcome back. This is the third unit to this module where we're reviewing the 5 dysfunctions of a team, written by Patrick Lencioni. In this unit, we're going to connect the book, kind of look at the book through the lens of the aide-de-camp leadership values that we presented back in the Ted Lasso module. So those 4 leadership values were emotional intelligence, enthusiastic mindset, lead by example, and influential.
So emotional intelligence, the words we use to really describe that were empathy, humility, and authentic. Catherine, obviously, she's kind of the star of the book. Through the whole book, she really, I think above all else, represents emotional intelligence. There's a lot of instances where she exhibits this value. I think my favorite, and she repeats this all throughout, and it's something that I personally can struggle with at times, where she's in tough situations or she's delivering news that the group doesn't want to hear, or somebody's asked a question or presents something in an unfavorable way. She gives it time to breathe. She remains silent. She has the intelligence to like if she asks a question, she doesn't automatically give the answer just because she knows it. She lets the team do it. She lets the team step in and hold other people accountable instead of it always being her. Like there's just countless instances through the book where she exhibits that by just giving it time to breathe and being quiet and letting it play out.
Yeah, I think we're going to have a lot of examples from the book that really hit on a lot of on multiples of these leadership values. But for emotional intelligence, I really like the situation where Catherine was having to have this final kind of hard conversation with Mikey about really giving her 2 options. I'm not going to fire you, and I'm not going to ask you to leave, but what I am going to ask you is to you're going to have to change. It's going to have to be wholesale change in order for you to continue to be a part of part of this team. And so, but just seeing the dialogue kind of written out or listening to it within the audio book, it just showed a lot of qualities that I would relate to emotional intelligence, and including the words up here on the board. So
yeah, and Patrick Lencioni does a great job of using terminology in the when Catherine first talks to Martin, when he pulls his laptop out in the middle of a meeting and he's typing, and she calls him out on it, right? And he says things like, she says, "Martin, are you working on something?" And he'll add, she said this without a hint of sarcasm, just really framing up how good she is at handling those difficult conversations.
Sure. Yeah.
It's really good.
Yeah, and I like what you were talking about at the beginning, is she always lets time in between where she speaks and when they get done speaking to make sure they're done, or before she jumps in, she sees is anyone else going to jump in, so I don't have to. She kind of lets the group do that. She's very, her EQ is very high.
Yeah, and she does it with the chairman of the board too, when she talks to him.
Exactly.
She does it both ways.
Yeah. That's the one that I put down for the next one, which is enthusiastic mindset. She basically goes into CEO mode. He's questioning what she's doing, what her goals are, and kind of regretting hiring her. And she's very confident, which is one of the ones we described. I don't know if they can see it, but it's up on the board. We describe the enthusiastic mindset as positivity, enthusiastic, willing to help, approachable, inspiring, motivational, committed, consistent, confident. And in that discussion with him, she's very confident. She's consistent. You can tell she's very committed because she's been getting all this data for a week, so she's just watching and she's ready to implement a plan. She's just very put together, and she's not doing anything by mistake. Everything's intentional. She's not burning bridges just for kicks.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and from an enthusiastic mindset, one of the best examples that I had from the book was there's a guy named Nick who was hired to be COO, and he kind of comes to this realization moment where he's really frustrated with the position that he's in and how he feels like he's being underutilized within the business. He had these kind of grand hopes of helping build and grow the business from a mergers and acquisition standpoint, and he doesn't have that opportunity because of the 4 truths that we talked about in the introduction. They're still behind their competitors. They're not doing the things they need to as a team to be able to bring other organizations and roll other organizations into theirs. And so he comes to this realization, and it could have gone really bad, but like in their next day, in their like offsite session, they find out that JR, their VP of sales had left, and there's kind of this there's this discussion within the group about who's going to take over that role, and Nick, coming off of like this realization and being frustrated about where he is currently, just like I don't know. My impression of that was just like him pretty enthusiastically like stepping up, despite the fact that he's worried about being kind of pigeonholed back into this like VP of sales capacity. It's why he came to Decision Tech, was to not just be seen as that, but he knows it's a need for the company, and he jumps to the challenge, to take it on, and it ends up paying off for him in the book. At the end of the book, he ends up returning to that COO role where he's got multiple people like rolling up to him, and he's kind of leading that part of the organization more like strategically. So yeah. I really like that example from the book related to this value. So
I agree, that was a good one. I think Mikey also throughout the whole book gives us a lot of opportunity to see how not to act, what not to do, right? For emotional intelligence and enthusiastic mindset. But not only that, like I think the book does a great job of showing you how Catherine has multiple conversations with her, and it's evident that Mikey is not aware that she lacks these skills, that she is not doing, even when the final conversation that one of y'all brought up, that she has with Mikey, and Mikey's first words are, me? Like, it's me you're talking about? I'm the one that's the problem? Like, right. Catherine is a leader, sometimes, like, a lot of times, the people that struggle in these areas don't realize they're struggling.
Yeah.
And Mikey was
oblivious. Like lack of awareness,
yeah. She had no self-awareness. She did not know she struggled in this. And Catherine tried to bring it to her attention in a really outstanding way. Unfortunately, it just didn't work for her. But
sure.
It was a great example on how to lead people on your team and how to help them be aware of shortcomings that they have in some of these leadership values.
Yeah, and I don't know if you know this, but the chapter called Awareness is the one where I wrote down that Mikey's got to go because it's gotten to that point where, and she's just unaware, because I wrote, she has no EQ. She is just oblivious, and it's just funny because I didn't know if you realized that, but yeah, it is all about awareness or lack thereof. So
yeah. So the next leadership value that we're talking about, in the context of this book, is lead by example. Some of the words that we used to describe that was organized, punctual, efficient, being a student, and being capable. And so, one of the things, this is like a really small thing in the book, but towards the end, it talks about how like the work is not done. Like they have they come to like this point as a group where their sessions are getting better. Whether they're not exactly level 10 meetings, they're more like offsite sessions, but like they're working more cohesively together as a team. But like the work doesn't stop there. There's still problems that they're encountering in the business, and just like Catherine's commitment to be involved in those things. Like towards the end of the book, like Nick as COO and Jan as like the VP of finance, like they have like constant struggles and battles over budgets. And as a leader, like Catherine can kind of step out of that and just let her people work those things out. But like she sees an opportunity to continue to lead, and in this case, lead by example, and like being involved in like kind of helping like facilitate, mediate those budget battles that they discuss in the book. So I really like that from a lead by example standpoint.
Yeah, and so the book gives those examples of how what exercises you can do, and there's a chapter called Get Naked, and that's where they're kind of talking about themselves and building the trust aspect. And the book also says that the leader is the most important part for this, just because they have to be the first ones to be vulnerable in that situation. So that's my big one for lead by example, because it's really about the leader starting that conversation and building that trust.
So, setting the tone.
Yeah, setting the tone.
Yeah, and then like to that, in that regard, that Catherine shares the story about like why Mikey had to go. And she shares a story about like one of her first leadership roles where there was a high performer on the team, but that individual was not a great team member, and despite like all of the other people that were that person's peers on that team, like she had like despite all of their complaints and frustrations with that individual, she ended up like promoting them into like a leadership role, and then the rest of like a big part of the team left, And as a result, she ended up getting fired because she made the call. And so she was just like able to like help the team understand like what the repercussions are for having somebody that are not good team members, like are contributing to the dysfunction, not the function of the team, and kind of how to like what the consequences are for not making the right calls there, And I thought that was a great example of leading by example, like sharing that story, like being vulnerable, having like obviously trusting the group, presenting that in a way like to help them understand why this situation, the way it played out with Mikey, was probably best for everybody. So
Yeah, I think Jeff, in my opinion, was the best lead. I mean, Catherine she's got so many lead by examples, but Jeff, I kind of said in the previous unit, being CEO, stepping down to the executive team, then stepping off the executive team is a great lead by example moment for him. But like he's the first one to call Catherine out when he thinks that she's misstepped with Martin at the beginning, and she quickly says, hey, it's this way, this is it, and he listens to her, does what she says. He sets a great example for that team all the way through. She says, I'm going to expect you to still contribute to this team and be vocal and be a part. And he's like, I don't think that's a problem. Like consistently, every time you deal with Jeff, he's on board and he's setting an example for the team aside from Catherine.
yeah,
Which really leads into our last of the leadership values, which is influential. And I feel like Jeff, by leading by example, is so influential to that team. And the book ends with them saying, oh wait, you can't remove him from the executive team. This is horrible. And she says, guys, that was Jeff's idea. He come up with it, right?
Yeah.
And that, like, how influential is that guy to that team? And I mean, the words we used were great communicator, bold, decisive, which he really fits in, gets shit done, and intelligent. And like, I just think Jeff is the unsung hero.
Yeah, no doubt.
I think, did you actually say the speech or that she would do multiple times throughout the book? I think that for me is the most like influential part, where she's just repeating like the things that are the reality of, and this is like motivating them and communicating, and I don't know, it's her being bold, but I thought that was very good of her and being influential. And then I also thought that like the politics part, where they're like talking about, well, we don't think we're very political, and she's saying, oh, the most political group I've ever seen, and they're kind of all get together about it, and then they ask her to define it, she defines it, and then they're like, yeah, we're pretty political. Like, yeah, we are.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
I just think I thought that was a cool moment where it's like a definition of her like, communicating that this is actually what I mean by this, and they're all like, yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
that is us.
And you've pointed this out a couple of times, but like the way the book is framed up, like we get a lot of insight into Catherine's leadership, not so much like some of the other characters, like definitely not as much there. And but like from an influential standpoint, one of the big examples I saw of that in the book was, the conversation with the chairman of the board, where he challenges her about a decision that she's made to prioritize her offsite meeting over meeting with a prospective customer or client, and she just does a great job of like managing that conversation, and the outcome of that is basically her telling the guy like, hey, you've been really involved over the last 18 months prior to me getting here, and so in reality, like if you could do this without me, you would have already done it. Like you need me here, so let me do what I'm going to do. And not necessarily in those terms, but like
I think she's willing to accept the consequences of fixing this.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, and I just think she did a really good job of leading up in that situation and being influential to somebody that could be like, the chairman of the board is ultimately the decision maker about who sits in that CEO seat.
Well, I mean, he chose her for that seat, and I think Lencioni sets us up to understand how influential she is right off the bat when he chooses her for that position when she has no technology background, and he only knows her from a social setting. He's never worked with her, he knows she's been an executive and a successful one, but that's the limit of it. He doesn't know specifics about her, and he chooses her for it, and like.
And they bring her out of her retirement at that, right?
Yeah. What a testament to how influential you are that you made that much of an impact on a man just in social setting.
Right.
That is kids' basketball games.
Right. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, I just like that part and how it just says she went into CEO mode and just like destroys it, like, it just blows it up and everything, and then it's all good after that.
Yeah.
That's like the last time we hear from that
No, he gets
character,
on board
right?
and that
Like,
was
that's it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It just sets the tone, you know?
Yeah, yeah,
So I think that wraps up pretty much what we're gonna talk about with leadership values. So in this next unit, we're gonna wrap everything up for you, present kind of our big key takeaways and maybe some strategies and tactics about how to implement parts of this book in your day-to-day leadership life, right? So
Yeah.
stay tuned. Thank you.